Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone 2 Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Bend. My name is Debbie Boone, and I am your host. And today I am very proud to have the wonderful Dr. Ann Vande Linde as my guest, because Ann has long been, I don't want to say a mentor, because she didn't even know who I was when she was secretly mentoring me through her articles and all her education when I was managing hospitals, because I found her stuff and I went, oh, this is the woman I want to follow, because she is all about communication and she likes the stuff I like and she talks about the stuff I want to know. And so I've been following her around, secretly stalking her for many, many years. But Ann is a veterinarian, and she is a graduate of the University of Georgia's College of Veterinary Medicine. In addition to private practice experience, her career background includes teaching at various veterinary schools and colleges, technical schools, veterinary conferences, consulting on practice management issues, developing mentoring and coaching retreats for women practice owners, as well as working with the management teams at such corporations as Hills Pet Nutrition, IDEXX Laboratories, Pet Health Network, and Novartis Animal Health US. She is nationally recognized as a leader in the field of veterinary communication. She is widely respected in her ability to inspire others through her guidance in interactive training programs, strategic planning, problem solving, marketing programs, and services. Her concentration on excellent preventative care and good communication between pet parent and doctor are contributing factors to her growing reputation as a voice for total pet wellness and quality of life. In 2008, Ann founded her Vande Linde and Associates to focus on all aspects of exam room communication excellence. And she shares her time with an energetic border terrier, Mr. Darcy. And boy, energy and terrier, they might as well just be synonyms, right?
That's right.
So Ann, thank you so much. Now Ann and I, we will find each other at conferences and start to talk about some of our favorite topics, which are podcasts on communication topics, brain science, all kinds of, we geek out together. But as I said, for many, many years, I read anything that she wrote. And I think I first kind of met her in print when she was the Hills tech services veterinarian, and she started to write a lot of things about great communication between veterinarians and the clients. But Ann, we're both Southern girls. She's from Georgia. Now I live in South Carolina, but I'm from North Carolina. So we might have to have some interpretation here for Southern language for our audience, but hopefully not. We are both communication speakers, so forgive the y'alls. There's going to be some y'alls in this conversation, I guarantee it. But was your original goal in life to be a veterinarian? Because I know that many veterinarians want to do that for, from the time they're 5, and I was one of those people who wanted to be a vet. But there's some other ones who went, no, I just kind of decided it later on. Were you an early adapter or later on person?
Well, thanks for having me, Debbie. And you're right. We could talk about so many things and have fun.
We could, yeah.
But I've always wanted to be a veterinarian. It started when I was probably in the 5th grade or earlier. I became a Jane Goodall enthusiast. I just loved watching those National Geographics and all those things where you go into the forest and, you know, you watch the animals and you look at their behavior and why they did what they did. I just thought that was totally fascinating. And I thought she was the bravest, most wonderful person in the world. And as she's aged, I still feel the same way.
She still is wonderful. Yes.
She was really my first, and my mother was a scientist. She taught physics and biology and a bunch of different things. And so it was an interest that we could all do. My father's a forester, so we could go to the woods and find little animals and study all kinds of things. And so I really always liked the outdoors and animals.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm guessing that you kind of set your sights on that academically to achieve that goal, and were the excellent student that all veterinarians must be to get into vet school. So you went through, yeah.
Nerd. I could have lived a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I was very serious about getting into veterinary school and very serious at what I wanted to do, thinking that you had to be, you know, just perfect in every way. Another one of those perfectionist complexes, you know, that we have to get over later.
Yeah. We struggle a lot with that in veterinary medicine, with talks of perfectionism, and the overachiever continues on, you know, for the rest of your life. And I was kind of one of those overachiever kids too, except not enough to go to vet school. After 4 years of undergraduate, I kind of went, you know, I think I'm done. I really don't want to do this anymore.
I did that after veterinary school. I said, I don't think I want to do anymore.
I think I'm done with this. But tell me about you after you transitioned out of veterinary school. Did you worked in private practice?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did. And I'll show you one veterinary school story because it kind of does start my journey in a way. If I started with a significant blip, is when I was doing Med 1. I was doing Med 1 with all the people who wanted to do go into specialty. So I was with all the really, really smart ones. And I didn't think I was that smart, but I thought I wanted to do an internship or something. I didn't really know. I wanted to go to a zoo or what I wanted to do. So one day the head guy, who happened to be the dean of the school at the time at Georgia, walked in and he said, I'm going to send somebody into this exam room. And I just want them to talk to this person. She's a $1 million donor to the university. And I want you to go in and talk to her and make her feel at home and let her know that you're there to help her at the University of Georgia. And I'm going to pick the one of you that I think is going to do that the best. And he said, Mary Ann, would you go in there? And at that point in time, I didn't have the ability to realize that that was a compliment. I thought he was basically saying, since you're the dumbest one in the room, I want you to go in there and make her feel good. And it really offended me, you know. But I realized, you know, after I went in and talked to her and I diagnosed what it was and everything, it really wasn't about my intellectual ability. It was about my emotional ability. And it wasn't about me. It was about the donor. So I really think that was the beginning of my understanding that I communicated slightly different than other people. And that took me into private practice. So when I looked for my private practice, I really wanted to practice with someone who was a good communicator, who did really good care and really took care of people and the pets. And it was a good atmosphere to work in. So that was a very important thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I agree with you that, you know, I've often looked back at my career in veterinary medicine and think how lucky really I was to have worked in the practice that I worked at the very beginning, because I didn't know, you know, and none of us know what we don't know. But I got into a practice that had a practice owner who was excellent at medicine. It was an AHA accredited hospital. It got its 25-year AHA certificate.
Wonderful.
It was also a great business practice. My practice owner had started working a long time ago with Owen McCafferty.
Mm-hmm. I know Owen. I love Owen.
Oh, he's wonderful. He had laid a lot of the groundwork.
I said, if I could just have one day of his vocabulary,
yeah,
I would be so happy.
Oh, he's just amazing.
Yes.
And I think one of the thrills of my life, this is a little side story digression, but I saw him at a meeting one day and he came up to me and he says, Deb, I'm so proud of you. He said, I follow you on social media. I went, oh my God, Owen McCafferty follows me on social media. Just about made me have the vapors, right? Because I was so excited about it.
It's wonderful, you know.
That is that opportunity to have even a remote mentor like that showed you how to do the business part of it really well, laid that groundwork well. Now, I brought the hospitality part of it from my business restaurant background because my parents were that. But the combination of all
A
that, I
big
was really,
service
really
industry
lucky.
business.
Yeah.
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 Really, really lucky in that. So that first practice matters, or getting that good mentorship when you first start out makes so much difference. And I always feel so bad for practices or managers who want to grow in their profession who get stuck with a really lousy business person, as their practice owner. Like,
I,
man.
I agree. I think the first couple of years out of school or out of changing from one job to the other, even if you're like a manager, you're a regular team member, and then you are a manager, and then it doesn't really matter. The changes in position affect the way you work with people. And I do
Absolutely.
think the guy Dr. Richards, is who I worked for my first 5 years, and he really was a good businessman. He was a good practitioner. And I always call him my mentor tormentor because, they have to teach you the hard stuff, but then he has to learn some things too, because I was his first associate.
Oh,
So if you're the first associate, it's really hard for them when they've nursed that baby and they've done all the communication themselves to trust another person coming in. So it wasn't long after I was at his practice, he sent me to a school called Blueprint for Professional Sales for how to talk to people. And it was really interesting because I was in that class with all these people that are now consultants. And like one of them works at Heska, and one of them works at, I think Jerry Snyder was in there. There was a lot of different people from all over the place that I still run into. But it was a very hard week where you had to present things and talk to people and do conflict and all those kind of things. But it really made a difference when you came back to the hospital and you were talking to people. It actually changed the way I approach things or the way I listen to things, so that you could actually help people make a decision and a time period that was realistic for private practice. Because coming from school to practice, you don't have that ability at all. Very few people have that ability.
well, we've talked about this several times in discussions that we've had, and it's horses and zebras. And so
Yes.
general practice is very much the day to day and talking to clients and seeing common things over and over again. And then in veterinary school, first of all, the people who are coming there are already pre-qualified as somebody who wants advanced care, or they wouldn't even be there.
Exactly right.
And then you're dealing with the people who are walking in your door in general practice who, their perception of $25 is expensive for something, as opposed to, 2,500 for whatever the specialty hospital is going to even start to offer when they go there. So obviously enjoyed private practice. They had a good mentor to start with. What was your bend in the road that changed you into industry?
Well, my bend in the road was there was several things really. I think when you look at it from the standpoint of the practice, I was learning a lot. I was growing a lot. I'd been there for 4 or 5 years. I still had a lot more to learn, and I never have been a great surgeon. It's never been my thrill in life. But we were very big into dentistry, and gosh, this was like 20 years ago. And we were doing root canals and braces, and we were
Oh,
way ahead of a lot of things. And then
man.
had people from the university come in and do surgeries with us, and we had radiologists that came in, and we had people from Florida that came in and did different things. So we were really, that's what I really loved about him. There wasn't a limit. I mean, if something needed to be done, we'd look at it, we'd create a plan, and we'd take him through it. And if we had the ability to do it, we did it. If we didn't, we'd refer it. But back in those days, we didn't always have a close referral hospital. And we also were doing emergencies every fifth weekend. I think I was on for the entire county, which is quite a busy weekend if you're by yourself as a new associate. And I mean, we would trade off on those, but it's like I was working 6.5 days a week, 6 days a week, and then some emergencies. We did our own emergencies because we didn't have an emergency hospital. So it was time for me to buy in or go across town and buy somewhere and start my own or do something different, find something. Because at that time, what they were telling us is that if you were a woman, you didn't want to buy a practice by yourself because you needed to have a family and get married and all those kind of things. So I think I believed that great lie that if I was going to be an owner, I couldn't do those things. It was one or the other. So I chose that I wanted to investigate really what was out there. And that was really my bend in the road. The other bend in the road was that he was not, he, as a man, since I was his first associate, it was very hard for him to even think about it. He wasn't at an economical place in his development where he could share, because I didn't understand that part of the business aspect of it. So the thing is that it was time for me to move on. And then Mark Opperman came and consulted with our practice. And he had decided that he was going to take us all to ProSal. And I said, well, you know, it sounds good. It looks good. And, you know, we started out from veterinary school. Listen to this number, that $19,000 a year.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And then I'd worked for 5 years and I wasn't even at 30, you know. Wow. And now he's going to put me on ProSal. But what he didn't know is that Dr. Richards would go through my records and change things if I left something out or if he wanted. And he wasn't always doing it to be malicious, but he was a perfectionist. So he wanted to make sure. But what happened is it would switch things to his code. If we went to ProSal, that was going to cause a conflict between the two of us. Not because I really wanted to fight him, but because I wanted to make more than 30,000 if I had things to pay back and, you know, things to do. So it was economics in some ways, and it was the desire to be more in it, you know, and that I had to find another place if I was going to own or be a partner. So with that, I got a job at Hills, thanks to a very good friend that was working there. And she said that she had really enjoyed it and she had been learning a lot. And at that time, going to work for Hills, I had the most amazing boss at Hills. He's the best boss I've ever had, Scott Braswell. And he was amazing because he could make you laugh at yourself on things that you got real pious about, which was good for a perfectionist like me. And he could make me calm down, you know. But I think the whole thing about it is that was just a good environment. He did a lot. At that time, they only used veterinarians to call on veterinary hospitals. We were basically there to help and support the usage of the diets, still doing some medicine with other doctors and learning new things. We had all the specialists from all the schools come in and see us and teach us before we launched a product. It was like getting a MBA without being an MBA school. And it was a bunch of really good people. I mean, Hills hired really well. And so it was just a lot of, you learned, you worked really hard, but it was just a lot of fun.
You know, we were a Hills practice, and I remember all those things. I remember so much good content, business content coming out of Hills. And the fact that, and you probably remember this, do you remember when you get your little plaque because you were a certified nutrition consultant from Hills?
You were a nutritional consultant, and it was the NEP program when you were a nutritional excellence program. Yes. Chuck Weiner did that program at Hills.
Yes.
And he did a really good job with it. Yeah.
Well, I got mine. Of course, now they have this very elaborate, beautiful online program, but I did mine by reading little brochures and punching numbers on a punch telephone, you know, a keyboard.
Yes.
To answer.
I know. I remember it well because we didn't have cell phones. Remember? No, you couldn't just stop. You couldn't just pick up your cell phone and call. You were going to the pay phone or the hospital phone or your phone home, which actually had numbers that you could press.
That's how you press the numbers. Exactly right. So I got my little wooden plaque. I don't even know what happened to that thing. Probably in one of the office moves, it went by the wayside. But, you know, it was those kind of programs that Hills put out that were very beneficial to the business knowledge of not just nutrition. I mean, the importance of nutrition in practice, but other things too, because they really had a lot to do with TD and the development of dental knowledge that veterinarians had. And you know, to this day, I remember you're talking about your practice being very proactive about dentistry. Well, one of my veterinarians loved dentistry, and I think that's all you need is one in your practice.
All you need is one. Yeah, and a technician too.
A technician too, yeah. And so Dr. Cobb had a client come up and he said, I want you to schedule a dental cleaning for this animal. And I said, okay, but he didn't really explain that to the client very well. This is really early days. And so I said, well, sir, Dr. Cobb wants me to schedule an appointment for your pet to have his teeth cleaned. And he went, do what? Have you lost your damn mind? This is exactly what he said. And I went, no, sir. But, you know, I didn't have any scripts. I didn't have any training. I didn't know how to defend
No, we didn't have any of that stuff. We learned. I remember I laughed. I found this the other day. My first policy manual, I know he would die. It said that I had to wear makeup to work. And I said, boy, that's really bad. I meant to really look bad one day. I did wear makeup to work, but I thought, woo, I wonder if the men said that too. But see, that wasn't meant to be a bad thing. But I thought, wow, wouldn't flow today.
No, absolutely not. Some of the stuff that, oh my gosh, some of the stuff was amazing. But
But you learn so much by going through those. I mean, I learned so much by working with clients, and then I also learned to really appreciate my team. I mean, a team is a make or break thing. I mean, veterinary medicine is a team sport.
oh,
And
absolutely.
it's always like sales when we were at Hills. It's a team sport. You're not in it alone. You're in it to work with this group to help them be successful. But I'm helping every hospital that I call on to the very best that they can for a client or for a person. And you're getting them interjections to things, networking with people to help them really solve things. And that's a big deal. I mean, for the everyday, because so many people, technicians, practice managers, even receptionists, I think sometimes they feel very isolated and people don't really know what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they truly make a big difference, and
Oh,
the hospital would
absolutely.
not function without them.
Absolutely.
So,
I was telling somebody yesterday, one of my clients, I love this exercise, and you can see it. It's on TED Talks. You're probably familiar with it. It's called How to Make Toast. And you know it. So for those of you who are not familiar with this exercise, do definitely listen to this TED Talk because I'm going to simplify it here. But you think about how complicated it is to make toast, and you go, okay, I'll stick some bread in the toaster and it's done. But it is not that complicated at all, because first of all, you have to get into your car and go to the store and choose the kind of bread. And at some point, you must have bought a toaster, or will you toast it there, or will you toast it in the oven? And then
right.
add any ingredients to it, And so when you start to break down something as simple as making toast, then you find out how complex it is. And so I like to do the exercise with teams. Tell me how to do a spay. How do you have a spay? And it starts with the client's inquiry, calling it at the front and asking, how much is it to spay my dog? And
Right.
then you follow it all the way through until they pay and discharge and go home. And it's incredibly complex.
It is incredibly complex.
Uh,
Incredibly complex.
yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was in practice, we didn't have computers. It wasn't computerized yet. They were just getting ready to really go wild with computers. The last couple of years we had computerized. But the thing is that at that time before, I have to make medical care plans for people and remember everything in my head. So you'd have to write it all down and make the medical care plan. And you were really the only person that could do it. I mean, because there's no place to store those. I
Right.
mean, because you're coming in each case. So you have to learn to do that as a new graduate in a timely manner, you know. And that's another thing that they don't teach you in school all the time, how to list it in order. So if somebody's reviewing it, it's logical to the progression of the disease. I mean, to me, that's the stuff that I learned from Dave Richards, as well as management stuff. And his wife was a manager. That was just amazing, you know. So, and the team is learning is so much harder as the team gets bigger
Oh, absolutely.
because of
Absolutely.
that, the
Yeah.
toast.
I have a practice that I'm working with right now, and we've got some baby managers, and they've never had a manager before. So we're trying to teach the managers how to be a manager and the owner how to give up. And the owner's a little frustrated because they don't seem to be catching on as fast. And I said, this is the equivalent of basically the old adage of putting a frog in water and turning up the heat. Well, the frog doesn't realize it's getting close to boiling because it happens so gradually. I said, what you're asking these girls to do is jump in the boiling water. They don't have the advantage of slowly heating up like you did when you opened the practice. So a little patience and a little grace goes a long way when you're trying to do
Or
those things.
just meeting with them and having some kind of structure where they can get feedback or ask questions if they're confused.
Yes.
Because we always assume, it's just like, when somebody says, I don't give heartworm preventative, we always assume it's the cost or whatever it is. But, until you ask the client, well, tell me more about that or whatever it is. We talked about questions. We're making the assumption that we understand what they need when we really don't know what they need. So
Exactly.
to me, that's so gigantic as you start going into the hospitals and watching the gossip and watching, what you can do and you can't do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I know you transitioned to Hills, but was that scary for you when you thought about leaving the comfort of practice and then moving into something that's really fairly different?
Oh, yes. I thought my world was coming to an end. In all due honesty, that was one of my moments of truth because all my life I'd want to be Jane Goodall, and be a veterinarian. I loved being a veterinarian. I loved talking to the clients, you know, but it just wasn't a time for me to buy in. And I knew if I kept staying, you know, then I would never get that business opportunity. So it was a huge step for me, because you think, well, you're leaving. It's like that show that used to be on when I was a little kid where the guy got thrown out of the military and they broke his sword and you're branded. You can never come back,
Oh, I'd forgotten about that show. I remember
Yeah.
that show.
And people will walk up to you and say, well, you don't want to be a veterinarian anymore? And I'm like, I am a veterinarian. I'm just helping in a different way. And I still do relief work and all those kind of things. But it was like, it was a huge confidence deflator because you're thinking, am I not made for private practice, or was it just this practice? Do I want to own? What is it going to be like to be someplace else? Because there's also a little bit of when you change jobs, it's like wherever you go, there you are. The issues you take with you are still your issues in your new location. So have I grown up enough to deal with those? And so I did some very serious, I also broke off an engagement at that time. So it was a very, very dark night of the soul for Ann Vande Linde. That was when I had to actually navigate it. And so I had a good counselor, I had some good friends, and I worked on some things. And that's when I realized it's not perfection that's important. I mean, although it's hard to stop that when it's not being perfect, it's not making the right decision. It's choosing something that you'll enjoy and can make a difference with your career. So that's where it really matters.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd love to investigate that decision-making process a little bit more because I know that there are people out there who, like you, I mean, they're the self-talk, right? It is all about the self-talk. Can I do this? Should I make this move? Am I failing in some way, my goal in life because this is what I always wanted to do. And now all of a sudden, maybe I'm not going to do that anymore, or at least not the same way I thought I was always going to do it. And I hear that a lot from especially technicians and some of the veterinarians are like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be when I went to vet school. I wish they could. And of course, we all wish we could kind of see into the future when we make these decisions. It's very difficult to make a 17 or 18-year-old decision for the rest of your life. And at 40, look back and go, man, I was 17 when I decided that. Maybe that wasn't the best choice for me.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about, kind of how you made that decision or the processes that you went through or some of the tools that you used if you or even what you would use now.
Well, it's really interesting. I still think journaling is a very good thing to do. I have trouble being consistent, but if you take either a video, journal, or if you can just write like one or two, three sentences of how you're feeling each day and processing it, I think that can be very beneficial. I think what helped me the most though was at that time was working with a counselor and getting some skills that I lacked. Okay, the skill that it's not failure if you take another choice. It's just another choice. It's just a bend in the road, so to speak. And it's you can always come and do different things in different locations. So nothing is an end. You're not jumping off the thing. So those are some irrational thoughts that I had to work on, to what's rational, what's not, that you're putting on yourself. That's a lot of pressure. And I think until you get those skills, it's really hard, and your self-awareness, it's hard to make that step or to step out on your own. And then sometimes you have to just be uncomfortable being uncomfortable, until you get the whole thing down. But the thing that was so good about moving to Hills was there was such a support team there to support you. We had such a good team of people that would help you, that you could call on different things. You trained for 6 weeks with somebody, so you were really getting a lot of skills and a lot of input from the company. And so you had a good safety net there, which was totally lacking to some degree in practice, although I had more mentoring than most.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that those were things that I think really made a difference. And of course, I read a lot of books. And if I went back and looked at books that I read, I don't know. It's hard to go back that far. I always really liked The Heart of Leadership, servant leadership books. I always was really into that. And I've always read books, that were on brain science and changing of habits, even back then, before I didn't read, Jane Austen like my dog did.
Yeah.
And I was always interested in helping other people, which is another thing. When you're feeling bad yourself, helping other people can be a real, it can be really helpful to you. When I left Hills, though, I thought I was the only one in the world that was struggling with those problems, which you realize that no,
No,
there's a
no,
lot of
no.
people that go through
Right.
exactly the same thing. And there's something about that that's very healing,
Hmm.
accepting.
Yeah.
You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed.
Right. Right. You don't need to be fixed. One of the things that when you said that help other people, I remember this so vividly. I think maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Michael J. Fox was the keynote speaker at VMX, and I was sitting there listening to him talk. And of course, he has Parkinson's, and he had tripped coming up the stairs to the podium. And as he stood up there, I could see his hand bleeding from walking up those steps and when he fell. And he stood up there and he gave that keynote and he said, "Look, I don't feel sorry for myself. And if you ever do feel sorry for yourself or you feel, like this poor me stuff," he said, "go out and do something for somebody else." He said, "then you will feel good again. Go do something for others." And I thought, how can he? I mean, he stood up there and he said that bleeding and bruised up and, suffering like he did. And he still said, go do something for other people. And I think that's such a valid point as we tend to, as humans, are self-centered and self-focused. But when we do go outside of ourselves and go and are helpful for others, that we actually lead a much better and more fulfilled life.
You have to watch out sometimes, though, for those of us in the, this is what my watch out was. I would be, and my counselor used to say, she who whittles herself away will have nothing left to give herself. So you do have to watch that boundary, which I think some of us struggle with. It's what's the boundary between helping and manipulating and controlling? What's that? Where are you in that line? And so I think you have to really pay attention to that because
well, I
as you,
think that the importance of that, the help has to be by your choice.
that's
It's
right.
not because you were manipulated into it, guilted into it, shamed into it, but because you choose to do it because it gives you joy.
Right,
And
because it's your choice to make.
yes,
You
and
know,
it is
I
your
hear people saying all the time, I didn't have a choice. I had to do it. You always, always, always have a choice. You might not like what comes with the choice, but you always have a choice.
You're right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a very big thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you completely.
I knew this was going to be a good conversation, Mary Ann.
The rocky road of life.
Oh, I'm telling you
But
what.
we all have them. We all have them. But if I had a lot of good friends that would say, "No, Mary Ann, you're really good at this. You ought to do this." And that's what I went back and did relief work one weekend for one of my friends in Atlanta, and it was like I was doing all these things that she hadn't done. She said, "How did you learn how to do this?" I said, "Well, when you're in Valdosta and it's in the middle of the night, you got to do things. You got to learn how to do it." So those things were really good. The people side of growing up when you get out of veterinary school, and working with the team and learning to meet people in the community and actually with all your learning, that's hard for people. It's always hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, one of the things that I see, and you talked about the academics of it and how hard you studied and that maybe you should have had a little more fun along the way when you were young. But I think that so many veterinarians, they are laser focused on getting into school, know how hard it is, knowing, what it takes to get in there, but they also miss out on some of the learning skills, which is working at a fast food restaurant when somebody's not mad about their cheeseburger and you're the one who has to deal with that. So you don't learn, as a young person when you are very, things bounce off of you when you're 16. You're like, freaky diggy, I don't care that much. And it's just hamburgers. But when it gets older and you get into life and death situations, then it becomes more difficult to learn those skills in those situations because they're all hot topics, So
or you make it all about you.
Yeah.
I did this wrong. I remember in school I had another experience where everybody would laugh at this one, but we were going around in rounds in Med 2. So it was all the very intelligent people, or we thought we were, let's say that, where we're going for all the residencies and insurance. So they're coming around, and the teacher decided that he was going to make us bark for the cookies. Well, I was sitting on the far end of the room, and I thought, there's no way in the world that I'm going to bark for a cookie. I'm not going to do it. So, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to bark for it. And all these people were doing that all the way around. They thought it was so funny. I didn't think it was
I
funny.
thought it was very
So
demeaning. My
I
goodness.
was very demeaning too. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm just being a fuddy-duddy or a Miss Perfectionist. Is this one of those things where I am not setting a proper boundary? Am I getting offended by something that's really just a game? But the girl that was sitting beside me was like 5 years older than me. And so when he got to her, she said, "Sir, if you think that I am going to bark for that cookie, you are sadly mistaken." And I thought, I love you.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I was going to do it too, but I don't know what I was going to say. So something like, "I don't like that flavor of cookie." Probably would have been a joke. But the
Right.
thing is that that was a very uncomfortable, that we hope. So a lot of times things that I did were to make sure that nobody had to go through the same experience as me. So
Mhm.
that if somebody called me and said, "Is this okay?" I could say, "No, it's not okay. Now let's talk about what your options are or what you choose to do. So
Now, you transitioned from Hills to IDEX, is that right?
yeah, I worked at Hills for about 10 years, and then I transitioned to IDEX because they were going to do, and they're just now getting there with a lot of things that they're doing. Um, but they wanted to transition to make everything that they sold as IDEX, a living exam room type thing. And they wanted to get the education all together. So IDEX had a lot of different companies. There was the outside lab, the inside lab, then there was the stool testing, and then there was this. So there was all of these different things that they produced, and the computer system, and they functioned as separate satellites, so silos of each other. And they brought us in because they wanted us to do training that would actually encompass all of it. But and when we hired for that job, because they were trying to do something that would actually change the culture and bring all those working bodies together, we had to do all this test for communication, for psychological evaluations. We met with counselors, we did all this stuff. And they hired us, to do things. And it was not the right environment for me, is all I can say. Is after about 2 weeks, I said, "Woo, this is like really stressful emotionally," because they would get really close to talk, and it was very high D, where I want you to do exactly this. Don't think, do. And I'm thinking, how do I not think? I mean, I don't know how to not think.
Trained to think for a long time. I've been trained to think. Yeah.
So when I went back to see the counselor, he said, "Well, this is the environment. They are trying to move the needle, but it's not going to move rapidly. And so you have to decide if you can stay healthy in this environment, or these are the skills you want to master." And so after a couple of months, I said, I don't think I don't want to master those skills this way. I want to do something different. So I had to make a decision there, and I liberated myself. It was so nice. I said, I'm going to liberate myself. This is the right place for me. And so they had gone through they had decided they didn't want to change the culture. And so you could opt out. And I said, okay, that's me. I'm opting out. And that's when I went to work for, I think Novartis is where I went next. Yeah, to do educational programs. So yeah, but that was, now talk about hard. When I had loved Hills, loved everything I did. I had this great job there, went to help them develop that here, and it was a total, as far as I was concerned, flop. you know but we did do some good things while we were there. So
Well, and obviously the company is still around, still doing.
oh, and they're doing great. And they've got Jim Blacka and his team, and a lot of great people working. And the education, they are getting them to come together and make that unit. And I've had a couple of them come up and say, "I find little things with your name on it," and say, "Wow, look, they did this." I said, "Yay!" But it just was a matter at that time for what they wanted. We were in the right place at the wrong time.
Mhm.
So it wasn't the company.
Yeah, sometimes things are a little ahead of the timing, some of the timing is a little bit off. And I think that's an important, part of career development too, is to realize that you might be a little ahead of the timing, or you might be behind the timing. And if it's not your right time, then that's okay. There's probably somebody else who's right there for you.
Right.
And so obviously maybe it was Novartis. Now you were talking about one of my very favorite companies.
Oh, I love Novartis. Novartis was a
Um,
great place.
they
Yes.
talk about hiring. I wish I had the skills to hire that Novartis did, because I have really kept in touch with several people who are still good friends from Novartis, and these are just exceptional people. And
Oh
they
yes.
were, I just think it was just the perfect storm of a hot mess that that company went where it went, because
Well, people bought them. It was too good to not buy,
yeah,
at the time. So
yeah,
it just got rolled in with, to other things. I mean, I still think they make some of the best products that there were. I mean, and are. So good group of people. Mickey Court was another person that I'd worked with for years when I was in practice. She called on me when I was in practice. So I've known her all the way through this. I was excited that I get to work with Mickey and Joyce Logan, who's now at Pfizer's. And there's a lot of good
yeah.
people
Well,
that.
my practices were in Greensboro, so we were in the home office all the time, and that's actually how I got started doing consulting work. Was going over and helping Novartis with some marketing stuff. I was kind of like one of their key opinion leaders, and got started that way with that company. And Sharon Barnett
Oh yeah,
used to come. Oh,
wonderful person.
absolutely. And for those of you who do not know who Sharon is, she discovered the molecule for program and started us on the path of monthly flea preventive. Without her, this changed the face of veterinary medicine.
Everything,
Every,
everything. It changed
every,
everything.
yeah. But she used to come and give my team a flea life cycle talk, which was hysterical. And from because she was an entomologist, and so it was a little different perspective in veterinary medicine. And she would
She's just
talk.
a really good person. I mean,
Yes,
kind, hardworking, just a wonderful person.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I have such good fond memories of the Novartis team, and the good products that they brought to the market, and all the good stuff that they did. And I
They
kind of
did a really good thing with getting the lead hospitals, like you're talking about, to come to places and take them different places and get them with speakers and give them the things that they needed to grow to the next step. I thought they did a really, really, really good job with
they
that.
did, they did. Mia Carey was my sales rep. She was Mia Weisselman when she was my sales rep, and she taught us um, fish philosophy. And that was a real game changer for me for culture growth in our practice. And we really embraced fish philosophy and had used a theme every month. We would do be present, we would do play. We just have so much fun with that. And the team just embraced it wholeheartedly. And I really learned so much from those people coming in. And a lot of my sales reps were
It
really
makes a
good.
big difference if you use those sales representatives. A lot of them have trained, like I know at Hills, I know at Novartis, they trained us on all kinds of things so that we could come in and help in the clinics do some of these things. Because sometimes if you did it, you didn't get the same thing out of the team. We were leaving and coming back in. So you could sometimes have them facilitate for things that made a big difference for you, or just bring an organization in, or bring you to a meeting so that you could get an extra level of learning, or bring a specialist into your hospital so that they could work with you. I mean, there's so many things that if you had a good relationship with these sales representatives, that they could make a big difference, because that's really what they're there to do, and that's what the training is. So there's so much more they can do than just give you bags or
Oh yeah,
candlet. Yeah.
or free stuff. I've always been a little stressed about people who go, "Oh, I don't see sales reps," and I went, "You're losing such an opportunity,"
They
because
really are.
of course, veterinary medicine has become much more corporatized, and the training is available to them. But you're talking about when you and I were starting out like that, we didn't have corporate training levels. We didn't have any tools like this. And to
Mm-mm.
have somebody come in who had had the extensive training that the sales reps have had in not just product sales, but in other communication tools or business stuff that they would bring to your hospital was invaluable to me. And I talked to my sales reps every time they came in, and I also would ask them, pick their brains, is, what's everybody doing? That's cool. I mean, tell me what you've seen, because they are in, I don't know, you guys sometimes would have a territory and have 100 hospitals in your territory. I was in one. I wanted to know what you were seeing and doing, and that I could steal and do just do as well. And if you're not talking to people like that, you're losing opportunity for knowledge.
Really, you really, really are. Because I
Mhm.
mean, I've had people, I've had even people at university one time said, you just threw away your veterinary degree to do this. And I said, no, I didn't. I mean, I see what I'm doing very similar to what you do every day, except I'm in their hospital,
Mhm.
I'm helping them. And if they have a question, I can even get you on the phone sometimes for them. So I said, the reality of it is I can help them with their day at their day, you know, and with tools and learnings and also products and programs and services. And if I'm a good representative, which most people are sincere, they really want to help you make it better, because your business grows, my business grows, but it's got to be like that. And I loved seeing when we were doing that nutritional excellence program, helping the team learn how to do that. They were so proud of themselves, and it gave them something to really look forward to and made them feel special. And that's important, you
Well,
know.
it's also a big confidence builder. And, I've talked to many times, I'm sure you've said the same things. Everybody on the team is a teacher. And my front desk sold much more food, much more preventative than any of my doctors did. And we were trained to do that. So our doctors didn't have to do that. We could talk about the shampoos, we could talk about the different diets, we could make suggestions because we were confident in our knowledge. And of course, I was an advocate for training, and I put training modules out. My staff took tests, they got grades, they got raises when they
That's
got good.
right. I think that's the way it's going to
And
be good. That's what's going to happen.
and our clients listened to them because there was a consistent message all through the practice from every single soul. This is what you need to do. This is what we believe in. This is why we believe it. And when people are getting all these mixed messages, it just confuses the clients and trust is broken. So it is so valuable to learn this stuff and be very confident in your training.
That
And then,
repeat message from the front door to the back door to the clinic and back out again is very, very important.
well, I call it the gospel of the hospital. What's the gospel of the hospital? And it can't be more than one, because then people don't know. And this is the struggle that you have in multi-doctor practices, is that everybody wants to preach their own sermon. And the problem is the message is mixed and everything gets really confused. And the staff, I can remember my last management position, I was overhearing the front staff. Somebody was questioning how much is it to spay my dog. And one of the receptionists answered the phone and said, well, which doctor do you want to see? And I went, why does that matter?
Yeah.
Well, because there was a $200 swing in what one doctor charged for a spay and what another charged for a spay, the old school versus new grad. I went, this is not acceptable. This is not, because there's a.
I always say if you have a trouble with the receptionist leaving, a CSR leaving,
Yeah.
you got a doctor problem. You have a doctor quote problem, and they're getting
Right.
burned up there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
almost pathognomonic.
This is incredibly unfair to the team. And it's really unfair to the clients, because it shouldn't be a crapshoot, depending on how much. Because if the client has two animals and one doctor spays one and one doctor spays the other, and there's $200 difference, then the options are somebody left something important out or somebody ripped me off. And neither of those is probably true.
The receptionists are the ones that get it. I
E-
mean, and they are left with nothing to say.
Exactly, because they're not the ones making the medical decisions and choices. So yeah, consistent messages and SOPs. But I wanted to ask you this because, and it really has not much to do with the bin, but it does have to do with what we both do for a living, and that is train people. Do you find that veterinary hospitals are consistently going, we don't have time to train, we're too busy, we don't have time to train? And I'm just curious as to what your response is to that.
Well, I think it's that you've got to have time to train, because if you want to keep your people are important. You're going to train your clients, you've got to train your people. And these people talk to your clients. So to me, if you don't train your team, sooner or later you're going to hit a big bump. And either they're all going to leave, you're going to have to redo the whole team, and then that'll really affect your business. So it's that, you get busy and then everything changes. If you feel like you're running around like a hamster on a wheel, it's because you're not training.
Yeah.
And not introducing a doctor correctly will get the doctor hierarchy struggles. So there's all kinds of things so basically I just say, You've got to invest in your people.
Yeah.
You know, most people don't invest in their people. I mean, you look at the amount on most people's, actual budget sheet or balance sheet, and they spend very little on training. Or what they do is they send their doctors to training, but they don't send the team to training. And I'm very good friends with Florence Sanford, who's a great manager she's retired now, but she's up in New York, in Albany, New York.
I know Florence well. Yeah.
And they won the first veterinary team award. But I mean, I know Florence took those receptionists and technicians to meetings. She asked them questions. She had them all sit together. She got the speakers to come and sit with them at the dinner table. I mean, she really invested. And you can just see what a difference. Even people that have graduated from NASA, I see them at other companies now, they have done great things. So that's, I think, special. In a veterinary hospital, you have the ability, if you invest in this team, that some of these kids come straight from high school, and then you're their first job. You have an ability to make this huge impact on the rest of their life. I mean, but we often don't look at it that way.
Yeah. Looking back, one of the things I'm most proud of is that just the ones that I can count of, and one that I know, that so many of the kids who work starting out kennel, working assistants, not only are now veterinarians, but they're practice owners. And that made me feel good, because I feel like they got a practice model that worked, that they knew that they could enjoy the culture there, and then they could take that model and do it for somebody else and do it for themselves and have an enjoyable, prosperous hospital with a good team culture, because they'd seen it happen.
Some realistic expectations.
Mm-hmm.
You help them set realistic expectations for how you work as a team.
Right. Exactly. And I think a lot of times we forget that people who are that first job, people have to be taught how to have a job. We assume that their parents teach them those things. And of course, I grew up in the restaurant business, and my family, I didn't have a choice but to have a job when I was really young. But we don't teach them to understand reliability, what difference it makes if they don't show up, or why they can't go play with a puppy in the hall when everybody else is busting their hump, and that it matters. So they have to learn all those things. I've always believed that people genuinely want to do good work and they want to do a good job, but we've got to invest in teaching them how to do that, and that we will make time for what's important. We will make time. If we want to go to lunch, we'll make time for it. If we want to, learn something new, continuing education, we will make time for it. And like you said, I've seen it happen with the doctors where, they have to get 20 hours of CE. Somehow or another, they figure out how to do that.
Right.
But we need to make sure that our team is doing the same thing.
And that our team has the ability to grow and be different too. And I think that's really, really important. No matter what. So we did those women retreats where we had all the practice owners. We started doing those because my friend Sally Jackson, who now works for Vet Success, she was making calls on the girls down in Florida that I used to call on when I worked for Hills. And they weren't seeing people as often, and they were all now practice owners, and they just felt like they were treading water. They couldn't get anywhere. So we started doing them to say, what are the basic skills you need to do? And what we found was, which I think is probably the coolest thing we've ever done, but it was like, we found by getting that group of doctors together, women together to talk about it, they all realized that they felt things, that they were frustrated with things, that they were all similar things. And so there wasn't anything wrong. They could learn from each other, they could teach each other, and they could visit each other's hospitals and help each other. And I think that's where training is so, so important, because if you don't get out and look around and see other hospitals, and even I did that when I was in practice with Dave Richards, we used to always go look at other people's practices. And we had Bob Lavoie in, we had Jerry Snyder in, we had, pretty much everybody that was doing practice management at the time had come through our hospitals. So the situation was that, but that ability to share your learning and grow, I think is really a magic point, and not to take yourself too seriously and learn.
Exactly. Well, in different communities, and I'm sure you saw this as you were moving through with your travels. I found that in our community in Greensboro, Novartis had sponsored a practice manager group and started it for us. And we would meet once a month and have lunch, and we would collaborate. Well, my boss came to me one day and he said, "Don't you give away any secrets."
Trade secrets.
Yeah,
Trade secrets.
I said I'm not going to give away any trade secrets. However, this is really helpful. We collaborate with each other. We will call each other. We can run out of stuff and call and go, hey, have you got any of this? Or we have a challenging client. We go, hey, I think they came from you. Did you have a problem with this person? Oh yeah. So they're chronic. But we're collegial with each other, not sharing, like numbers or anything, but we still shared enough information to where when we got into a bind, we had somebody to call, or we were struggling with a decision, or a person that had given us a hard time, then we could call somebody, and we were the answer person for each other. And there are hospital groups or hospitals in different towns that I've been into, as a Patterson trainer, that the practice owners will go, if those people are coming, then my group won't come. We're not gonna talk to those people because they've developed such an animosity to each other. And I don't think that's helpful to anything, because everybody's got a competitor, but when you have your brand and you're in your lane, then your clients will come to you because you're going to be what they're looking for, what they seek. Mm-hmm.
You can learn it, but you have to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's one thing to learn it and share it, in these meetings. It's another thing to come back and apply it and get it to help you in your hospital. And that magic bullet is never exchanged at the meeting, until you start applying something and trying to do it. And it's never going to look exactly the same. Like Mayo, Rochester, Mayo, Scottsdale, and Mayo, Jacksonville all have the same mission statement, vision statement, values. But if you walk in Mayo, Rochester, it's a very different feel than Mayo, Jacksonville, because culture is hard to recreate, So sharing of ideas doesn't automatically give the same thing that they have. That's what I think is really big. I think that's what sometimes we as owners don't understand. You're not going to talk about them or to share tips about how much they made or didn't make, but you are learning how did you apply these things to make a difference in the team, to do better communication, to that kind of stuff. Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, I would say it's just learning skills that apply to your unique business. And you and I have been in a lot of hospitals, and each one of them is extremely unique. They're just as unique as a fingerprint. And when I'm doing consultations, and I'm sure you do the same thing, there are things that they do that are wonderful. And I'm not going to touch that. But then there's things that they do that really need help. And then that's what we're going to work on. But then the next hospital I go to, the opposite will be true. So it's all about being custom to what that practice needs, and to communicate with them the way they need to be communicated with, very much like we're training people to do that with that unique client that's on the other side of the exam table, because they don't all want to be communicated with in the same way. And we need to use our emotional intelligence to pick up on that and to communicate with them the way they need to hear it, not the way we need to say it.
Right. That's true.
Because if we said it in jargon, they wouldn't understand anything we said. We'd all speak it to medical terms and they wouldn't understand a thing. True. So we need to talk to them as human.
I love that Alan Alda book that he has. It says, if I understood you, if my face looked like this, because it's all about talking to doctors and how the doctor thought the client understood, but they didn't understand it. And I mean, we've all had that happen to us. You finish this great description of something and the person was nodding and looking like that. And then they get to the end and they're like, well, does he really need it? Like, oh no, I didn't do it.
Or even better, they come to the front desk and they ask your receptionist to interpret what you just said for them. Now, what does that mean? And they're asking that person. And I can't even tell you how many times I've had that happen. Yeah.
I actually would sit out in waiting rooms when I was waiting to see people when I worked for Hills. And you'd hear that all the time. And then sometimes I'd hear the receptionist say, oh, you don't want this, you want that. It works better. And they always got what the receptionist said.
They would follow the receptionist. Exactly. I mean, I would tell veterinarians, I said, you do realize that your receptionist can shoot you in the foot at any moment by just saying, I think that's too expensive, or he doesn't really need it, or you can wait. This is the importance of training your receptionist to understand why you're offering these things. Because if you don't, they're not going to support your decision. And the client's going to go, okay, well, I'm going to listen to her because it's not going to cost me anything for one thing. And I like her better. I've talked to her 3 times today and I've only talked to this vet once. And so I'm going to listen to her. Yeah. Yeah.
That new lady.
That new lady. That's right. Exactly right. So Marianne, now when did you start your own company?
It was in 2008. I started my own company. And I didn't really know that I wanted to start my own company, really, to be on my own, to just do consulting of some types. But I've always loved, the thing I loved the most was helping people talk in the exam room.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that that was something that I really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed the people. And we had a lot of people that were graduating from veterinary school that were really having trouble making that transition from graduation to where you put them, visits into 20 or 30-minute segments, or do I keep this animal? Do I move on? How do you know when you're overwhelmed? How do you use the technicians? So I just started playing in that space because I felt like that was the one that I really enjoy the most, because I love the business aspect too, but I just think the communication is so significant to make a difference in your life. So
yeah, I agree. And it's good to watch the finances. You've got to pay attention to it. You've got to have good systems in place. But if you really want to be profitable and prosperous, get your team to communicate well, and the money comes. And the people you can pay
it is a team sport. It is definitely a team sport,
yeah,
because
and they get paid well.
Mhm.
So what do you think the value of your network was to the success of your business? Because I started in 2008 too.
Mhm.
So did I think let's see, Lap of Love, Mary Gardner, Eric Garcia's is kind of maybe a year or two before that. So in the Great Recession, we saw a need, took a leap, and started a business in the middle of the Great Recession. So tell me about, how did network help you when you were making that change?
Well, but my network, since I made that change, I already had some things booked into the next year, or speaking stuff. And where I did take a detour a little bit was in 2000, and I think it was 2009. Yes, it was 2009 that or 2000, yeah, 2009. I went up to work with one hospital, to just take a job with one hospital, because they had 27 doctors and 150 people, and it was very large, and they were trying to train. And so they wanted to set up a training institute. And as you know, that's what draws me places, is those training institutes. And then we had a bunch of really good new associates coming on. So I thought, well, we could train the new associates, and then we could start working with some of the other things. But one of the big things that's important about culture change and training change is you have to have complete buy-in from the owners. Okay. Whoever you're doing it for, they have to spell out what they want done. Because if you are ahead of them or behind them, then you're not helping the team effectively make the transitions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for a couple of years, but then my mom died. And that put my job and my life on a little bit of a hold, because I had to move back home to help. And so then re-putting things back together with helping with that with my father and helping my sister, and then doing my business, that really changed. Learning how to juggle those three things, because I'd always been a little bit of I like to work. I really like to work. And so, but it was hard to know the switching, when you're needed, that you have to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I really credit the women's retreats with helping me understand that, at different times you have different things that you have to do. And you just have to adjust to that. And then when you're through that, or you've got it reestablished, then you can start again, but you can't run at the same pace you were running before you hit that wall.
Yeah. Yeah. And life will throw you those curves that you have got to say, okay, I have to step back. I have to focus on this thing now. And the other things, either it'll wait until I get to it, it'll be there. Or it won't, and something else will be there. Something else that maybe I should be doing that will be my great thing.
Right.
It's because there's
And the
always the
changes have
next
been,
great
if you
thing.
look at the last 10 years in veterinary medicine, it's been a fast-paced, amazing development. It's changed so much in so many ways. Women are now the predominant force, as it used to be men. There's just so many tipping points all across the board of what's happened. But the thing that excites me is that people do want to share, like what you're doing right now for people. People do want to support people. We can actually talk about suicide. We can talk about overwhelm. We can talk about depression. We can talk about and say, I'm unhappy. I want to make some changes. That's good. Those were all things that could have been swept under the rug before and not talked about.
Right.
So, and we've got people that are developing things that can help people learn, and you can reach out to people. So those are all very, very good things that have changed in the profession.
Yeah. And looking back, I mean, I started working in a hospital in 1985
Yeah,
as
me
a
too.
part-time receptionist.
85, we were right on the same.
Right on the same page. And I mean, really all we talked about was fleas. I can't even, I can probably still have that neuro pathway that's the flea talk that talks about.
And you can fill up a whole grocery cart with just,
Oh,
people say, I think Interceptor or Sentinel is too expensive. I would go, you've got to be kidding me. You used to spend like all this money to bomb their house and fog their house. And, now they're buying one little tiny pill.
Right. Let me put a whole house full of chemicals in here and breathe that when I come back into the house, or give my dog a pill. And putting it in perspective, things have just changed so dramatically. I remember so clearly my boss coming up to me and go, of course, we did clinical trials on programs, so we knew how well it worked. And my first order, what was that, 1995 or something like that, 99, I ordered $35,000 worth of one product in 1995 because I knew, and we had been pre-selling it to all our clients, going, wait till this comes, wait till this is amazing, just wait till this comes. So we got on the phone and we called all our clients and said, it's here. We finally have that thing we've been telling you about, we couldn't talk about, but now it's here. And it just started moving off the shelves. Well, I was one of the ones who still had product, because the first thing it did was go back order because it sold out. Remember that? But looking back on that, and then my boss came up and goes, gosh, we're not going to have any fleas. So if we won't have
what are we going to do?
what are we going to do? How are we going to make a living because we don't have any fleas? And I said, Doc, here's what I think is going to happen. I think all this money that our clients are spending on fleas and coming to us for sprays and the exterminator in their house, well, the animal, first of all, is going to get to move into the house.
Right.
Because they're not going to worry about getting fleas in their house. And then they're going to start doing better care for them. They're going to start getting the blood work we want them to. They're going to start getting their teeth cleaned like they need to be, because now they're going to be part of their lives every day, every moment, rather than sitting out here on the porch. And, I didn't really realize that it was predictive, but at that point it really was predictive. And animals have now moved and transitioned into being surrogate children.
Mm-hmm. It's very,
excuse me.
I remember we had this discussion when PetSmart was coming up, and they were opening everywhere, and they kept saying, well, veterinarian's going to be out of business. And so I saw this thing from early veterinary medicine where they had, I think it was a horse and buggy, and so they were going to have cars, and now veterinarians were going to be out of business because there wasn't going to be more horse and buggies. Woe is me. And then it was something, something else, but then it was women. Women are going to ruin the profession, and then it's these big format retail stores. But the reality of it is none of those things have changed the relationship of the human-animal bond, nor have they changed the fact that pets make a significant difference in people's lives. Absolutely. I mean, and by taking care of their pet, they can learn how to take better care of themselves and others. There's just no better thing that touches so many people's lives. I mean, we all know that there are people that, they'll come in and they may be hard to work with, but yet they love their pet. And that's a common language you can share and make a whole difference with. And so to me, that's the magic of veterinary medicine. If we don't let the little things that are bubble gums on the bottom of our shoes, just determine the other thing.
I love it. The bubble gum on the bottom of our shoes. It's true. I mean, right now I think teams are struggling. Obviously, everybody is outside of their rhythm. COVID has caused us
totally rework their whole flow. I mean,
everything has changed. And I'm getting a lot of feedback from managers. Oh, our clients are being so horrible, and they're really mean to us. But honestly, the clients are afraid, but we're afraid too. And when you have two people who are both equally frazzled and trying to communicate together, then both of us need to step up our game for communication. And then you put a mask on and you have disguised about 50% of how we are visually reading each other too. So we really have got to pay much more attention to our expressions and, using our eyes more than our mouth to smile.
Or writing things down, or
Yeah.
showing things to people on the pet, or making a circle. I've actually started, I call them love notes. When I do relief work, I say, I'm going to make you a little love note here, and I'm going to tell you what I think is important, and then you're going to see if you have any questions as we go over it, because otherwise they go home with nothing.
Right.
So many people leave the veterinary hospital now with their invoice, and I hear doctors say, well, I printed all that at the bottom of it. I said, well, you just, unless you highlighted it, called their attention to it, they're not even going to look at it. I mean, and it's not that they don't care. It's just that it gets stuck somewhere and they probably lose it before they get home.
Yeah.
So, if you make something personal and you're going to send it to them on their email, tell them. But, now you can take a video of the little kid brushing the teeth and send it to them. And then that little kid can take it to show and tell. Okay. There's so many things we can do now that we couldn't do before.
Oh, if I worked in a practice today, I've laughed and I said, I would use so much bandwidth, but I would make videos. I would be sending so many text messages out to clients. I really would be communicating probably more than people would think would be necessary. But if you over communicate, you can never fail people. No. It's our under communication that causes us grief.
People love to learn.
They do. They
don't want to be upsold. Yeah.
I was getting some feedback from some CSRs who said, well, people won't listen to us. We're doing curbside, and they come and they don't have their phone, or they drive away. They don't call us and tell us when they're in the parking lot. They don't do anything they're supposed to. And I said, okay, look, so you got a frazzled and stressed person who's calling you up and they're going, my dog is sick and I need to come. And then, you're instructing them for all those things. And the minute you hung up the phone, their brain immediately shut all that down. And they maybe remember one thing you told them, and that was they can't come in the building. But if you will instead send them a list and said, here's what you need. So I created a checklist. But the other thing that's important is pictures, because pictures increase our memory close to 75%. And so if you just put pictures, the cell phone, the little curbside fill out form or parking space number, and brings a puzzle or a book to ring you're there.
Exactly. I love those things on videos. Videos will make you a video that you can actually attach and send it out to people the day before it comes in. So you could do a video, that's a little cartoon thing on that. You could do the program and show it. But if you have problems with somebody not understanding something, or it's taking the client longer, it means we don't have the process right.
Exactly right.
And so if you when you see that, just like you did, think about the process and map out the process, because that's what's hard, the implementation of the process. Once you get the process defined, it's pretty easy to then increase your game and make it special for people and do things. But until that's defined, people have a hard time knowing what to do.
They do. They absolutely do. Well, I've always grown up in the hospitality background, and that was the way we looked at things. And I think that one of the successes of our practice and my career success as it is that I always brought hospitality to the hospital, and I wanted people to feel comfortable and safe and enjoy their visit there. And you think, gosh, who wants to enjoy their visit to the veterinary hospital? But I've had clients say, you know what, I just love coming here, just sitting here, just talking to you people, just watching the animals come in and out. And as long as they're not in a big rush, you can make it a very positive experience for them. And all it takes is a little thinking. What would I like if it was me on the other side of that counter? What would I enjoy?
I think it's like we used to always say, we want them to leave feeling better and looking better than when they came in. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take a lot to make someone's day. I mean, I worked at Sea Island when I was younger, and I did that going to school, and I always said that was the best customer service training I think I ever got, because before dinner we'd go through the list. We had those roll calls. They told us what was in it, how the chef prepared it, and all that kind. And then you had to remember it all to go out there, and then we had to put the plates together and garnish it. So I became quite aware of what people like. You do. I mean, it's the best thing, and it's also great to teach you how to be humble and to listen. Yeah. I mean, it really does make a difference. But I think if you just we as veterinarians, we do such a good job communicating, I think, in so many situations, better than our human colleagues have done with human. I think we make people feel better and help people with difficult decisions more consistently than I think others. And I think you can make coming to the veterinarian a good experience for both the person and the pet.
Well, I'm sure that you've heard this, and I have heard it in my practice, that my practice clients would say, gosh, I wish you people were my human doctor, because if I could get the service from my doctor, if I could get the attention from my doctor, if they just spoke to me the way you speak to me and explain things the way you explain to me, I would be so happy and I would feel so much better about my own health. And there was a really nice Twitter feed about 2 or 3 days ago, and you might have seen it, where somebody said, I just, and she was a doctor. Does anybody want to be like my veterinarian? I just want to go to my veterinarian. And then, like, all these people got on there. And I went, oh, I wish every veterinarian could see this feed, because they struggle so much sometimes with thinking they're not good enough or they haven't done a good enough job. And I want you to think about 99.9% of our clients think we walk on water. And it's the 1.1% that gives us pain.
On the bottom of the shoe, you don't step on it often, but yeah.
Exactly. And so
we think about our failures. I mean, but I think that's what, another thing I learned from those retreats and from working at Hills. Everybody's going to make a mistake. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, receptionist, technician, we are, and we're not God, we're just people. And sometimes with the best of intentions, things die, and it's not like we have control over that. And I think that's where sometimes we have to be. But I also think, and I heard this from actually a human physician, where they would do, after something died, they would all get together and just have a moment of silence so they could say thanks for this pet and for these people, and then for what they're going to have to talk about, and for the hard work that they just put into it. And then they could go back about their day. And I think we are learning how to do things like that so that we can understand, how to deal with those feelings. Because I think that's the hardest thing. I can say for years that when something passed away or when you were working on it, and I unfortunately have this sixth sense where I can walk through and look at something and say, what's going on here? And it's a gift in some ways, and then it's a curse in other ways, because you can just tell that this is not going to do so good. Now, I know a lot of people that have been practicing for a while could do that anyway, because you kind of get a feel for things. But the whole thing is, how do you talk to the client? How do you help them accept it? How do you get the team to progress? That's something that I think we as veterinary medicine are doing and are continuing to work on doing much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, Marianne, let's see. I want to make sure I get all my good questions in here. So what advice would you give to somebody out there who is looking to make a career change? Because you've transitioned several times here, and
I call it a schizophrenic career, yes.
So how do you give courage? How do you take the ball and run with it?
I think courage is kind of like faith. It's taking the step even though you don't know what the next step is going to be. It's kind of like when Luke Skywalker walked out on that bridge that was invisible and you don't know you're going to get caught. But I think what you do is you look at the things that you're interested in, and you talk to people because almost everybody who's doing something, if you ask them, can you help me? Will you talk to me about this? I mean, I would be willing to talk to anybody. And so I think then you kind of feel, you can even go and ride with people to see if you like what they do for the day. So I think that's beneficial too. And I think then give yourself permission to try on different things and see how it feels and what you like and what you don't like, what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. There's so many different careers. I think it's so hard right now for kids to decide what they want to do because there's just so many things that are available to them, but I think if you go with what you're interested in and what you kind of get lost in when you start working on it, I think that's the big thing. Mm-hmm. But you have to investigate it and you have to look at what your strengths are. I like that strength finder quiz where it tells you what you're good at. I like knowing a little bit about, do you like to be with people? Do you like to do things differently? So I think there's a lot of things things like that can help you get to know yourself and your self-awareness where you are, that make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 100%. I mean, if I went into a CPA firm, I think I'd be like you. I would have to liberate myself very quickly.
Yes.
Even
Yeah.
though, do I understand the numbers and can I do that? Yeah, I can. But that's not what I love. And it's
I
not.
could do it every day of your life for the rest of your life. No.
Absolutely not. My husband has looked at me several times. He said, I wish that in my career I had found something I loved as much as you love what you do. And because he'll go, when are you going to retire? And I went, I'm not going to retire. I'm not
But if
ready
you
for
love
that.
what you do, it's not work.
It's
I
not
mean,
work.
that's why I tell people about this work-life balance thing. For half of my career, I worried about the work-life balance thing, and I think the work-life balance thing is another big lie. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's work integration.
I
I
agree.
mean, there are going to be times when your home life calls for more of your attention. When my mother died, there's going to be times in your life where your career is going to cause, but it's not going to be all the time, and it's not the end of the road. I mean, so I think if we kind of look at things realistically, that makes a big, big difference.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the hurdles that, there's the balance. And I've had to talk with Kim Pope Robinson about this because to me it seems
I love
like,
her.
yeah, it seems like we make people guilty if they're not saying, okay, I have to sort my time. I have to spend 50% of my day doing this and 20% of my day doing this and 30% of my day doing that. If not, then there's something wrong with me that I feel guilty about. And do I think you should work all the time? Absolutely not. And I am a workaholic. I think it's part of our generation to do that.
Sort of that when I was in practice, I definitely was. When I was at Hills, I would say I was.
Mhm.
So.
But I think the older you get, the wiser you get about it too. And so I'll take a break and go do something else, or I come back to this, and I might come back to it at 7 o'clock at night, but that's my choice.
Well, some things I've learned too that sometimes when I worked for Hills, I went in to call on somebody, and they went to Canyon Ranch every year out in Arizona. That's when they only had one, and I said, "Oh, that sounds like wonderful because you do all this training and you get to go to all these classes." And I said, "Oh, that sounds like, and you can work out and do things like that too." But I said, it's always been like a candy shop place to go. And so he called me about 2 weeks later and he said, "My wife is sick and I can't go. So if you want to take my place and go." So I went out there with all these Jewish women from that I didn't even know. But the thing I thought that was so great about that, because I think I was maybe 35, 30, somewhere in the early 30s, and is that well, it had to be later than that because I was with all the wives so it had to be 2011, all the wives from the firefighters that died at 9/11. And they also did a kids camp for cancer. So we did this values lesson. And I did it with all the wives and survivors and the children with cancer. And I'm telling you, that really did it really does bring you what's important,
Mhm.
because we're not promised tomorrow, and we're not promised our health. We're just promised that we're here. So if you work all the time, sometimes you miss things like that. I mean, and so you have to make time to do things. I mean, athletes have always been good about doing some of that, but it's got to be your number, your special thing. You
Yeah.
can't live somebody else's life.
No, no. Don't try to be somebody else. Just be you. Do you well, and do you that what makes you happy to do. That's the other thing too. Because some of the things I'm sitting here, I mean, this makes me very happy to talk to you.
It's fun. I mean, I'm having fun. Yeah. I don't know if it's interesting, but
And maybe it can be considered work, but to me it's not work. It's occupying my time, but it's not work. But and then there's other things that.
but the networking you gain from doing something like this, I think is valuable because that's what I think is so valuable, is knowing people that know people that can help other people, as we transition to whatever we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, Marian, we of course we knew we would talk this much. Uh, yeah. Any final words of wisdom that you want to share, or any like your very favorite books, a favorite quote, anything you want to leave the audience with?
You know, do I have a favorite quote? That's a hard one. What's your favorite quote?
You know, my favorite quote sits right here on my desk, and I've had it ever since I was diagnosed with breast cancer under the glass of my desk. And it says, "Courage is fear that has said its prayers."
One I keep in my car that's there all the time, and it says, "Love overcomes all fears." And it's got a porcupine talking to a turtle with a brush on his back. You know, and so this kind of goes along with that. C.S. Lewis, it says, "Love anything with your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it safe in a casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable."
I love that. Vulnerability.
And it's vulnerability and growth. I mean, if you're not vulnerable, you have to be ready, because you're not going to know all the answers, and it's always going to be a surprise. But that just makes life, that's what gives life, even though it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And you get that flat forehead, thing. It does make a difference.
It does make a difference. All right.
So thanks, Debbie. This has been fun.
It has been fun.
We should talk to each other more often. This is
We
really
really should. We really should. We would get no work done though. We would just talk all the time. Yeah. We're going to put Marianne's information up at the end of the show. It'll be in the description of the vodcast so that you can get in touch with her if you want her to come in and work with your doctors on exam room training. I can't say enough about how wonderful she is about teaching them that. And maybe one day I'll drag her into a clinic with me and get her to collaborate on some work.
That would be really fun. I'd love to do a training with you too one time. That would be fun.
That would be fun. Okay. All right. So here you go. Watch for it. We're going to do something together. You never know when. But you heard it here.
It's going to be fun.
Here first. All right. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Marianne, for being with me today.